Hey guys, it's Vincent, and welcome to the Vincent and Lewis Show. In today's episode, we're talking about Robbers Cave with guest stars
Monique
and Jared.
Alright, enough introductions, let's get into it. So let's go back to where it all began with this dude, Mustafar Sheriff. In the aftermath of World War II, Sheriff, along with many other social psychologists at the time, was interested in group dynamics and social interactions. So he asked a very thought-provoking question of, Lord of the Flies? So then he went on and asked for an opportunity to test his theory. Got a pretty penny for it, along with the research team. And that's how 22 11-year-old boys were unbeknowingly a part of a social experiment to test the realistic conflict theory in the summer of 1964, a theory that explains the reason for prejudice, negative stereotypes, and discrimination. Nothing could go wrong, right?
all from Protestant backgrounds, 2 parents, white, and well-adjusted good little boys. These boys thought they were signing up for a fun summer camp. Instead, it was a 3-phase, heavily monitored field experiment they were unknowingly participating in. Variables such as separating the boys into 2 groups of 11 and making sure to never once mention or acknowledge the existence of one another were applied for the first phase. The groups were also created in mind to balance out strength, intelligence, charisma, and etc. Much like the boys' locker room, the boys bonded and accustomed to social norms and even named their groups, one being the Eagles and the others being the Rattlers. The bonding continued to occur for that week, and once that week ended came phase 2, Electric Boogaloo.
At the start of the second phase, the groups were introduced to each other. They weren't immediately hostile towards each other, but the tensions started and continued to rise with the introduction of competitive games. The research team, along with Sheriff, specifically made the games to be very competitive with a system of trophies to encourage team dominance over the losing team. The observations noted that the bias for the boys' own teams started verbally and tame, but soon after, bias turned into prejudice and verbal turned into physical. Fights did end up breaking out, and in a recorded incident, the Eagles burned the flag of the Rattlers. And in the following day, in retaliation, the Rattlers ransacked the Eagles' cabin and stole private property. At this point of the experiment, Sheriff accomplished in confirming the realistic conflict theory and his hypothesis for the formation of hostility over the same ideal goal.
Going into the 3rd phase of the experiment, the research team had to intervene in a small conflict increasingly frequently. Sheriff saw that this was an opportunity to introduce superordinate goals. Although Sheriff has confirmed his theory, he also wanted to test his new hypothesis of halting inherent conflict to work together to solve problems greater than the force of single groups.
The first and most prevalent one was the drinking water problem. As the title implies, there was a problem with the drinking water. It had suddenly stopped flowing into the camp. The counselors allowed the 2 groups to try and figure out the problem all on their own. Luckily, the boys managed to make a big 5-head play and unblock a stuffed water outlet. Although it wasn't much, it proved Sheriff's hypothesis. As recorded, the boys celebrated and the Rattlers offered the Eagles the first drink. As these superordinate goals continued, the interconflict decreased significantly, and by the last day, the 2 groups would be able to sit intermixed at breakfast and lunch without problems.
Although this did end in a happy note, most real-life situations that reflect the influence of this theory do not end the same. Situations that reflect this theory continue this prejudice, whether it be the job market or just a simple admiration for one another. However, consider the following. The variables for the experiment were heavily controlled and specifically chosen a certain way, and the competitiveness of the games were also simplified to make sense to a child. So while this shouldn't be taken as a play-by-play of what really could happen, its importance for a potential reason behind hostile behavior is always a useful reminder when we socialize, compete, or much less see another person.
Make sure you like and subscribe.